Welcome to the Manhood Podcast. Yeah, you hear my hype music in the background there. This is our third season, 3 years of doing the podcast here. First year we did it, we debuted the first episode on Father's Day. Here we are a few weeks after Father's Day with our third episode. And in our first episode, it was an Earth, Wind, and Fire song that was the hype music. And here we got another Earth, Wind, and Fire song for our hype music. If you've never listened to the podcast, this is a podcast about fatherhood. I've been a father. I have 4 children. I like to think I've been a father for some 30, let me just turn that down a little bit, for some 36 years. From the day my first child was born to my last child graduated from college, exactly 36 years to the day. 36 years to the day. So I've seen some good, I've seen some bad. I've done some good and I've done some bad. And I try and offer some advice from my own experience and the experiences of others. I've had a number of people come on and share their stories, which is really, really good. Today I want to talk about a little bit about, and I've stayed away from this topic for quite some time, the relationship between the mother and the father, specifically Mother's Day versus Father's Day. You know, just Father's Day just passed. And we don't get the same warm and fuzzies about Father's Day as we do about Mother's Day. Mother's Day, it's flowers, it's gifts, it's let's go out to eat and everything else. Father's Day is kind of, let's get them some socks, let's get them some underwear. I'll send them a text, but we don't really go out of our way. It's not the warm and fuzzies. And in many cases, you hear a lot of people bashing fathers. Why? We've had an episode talking about good dads versus bad dads and what that really means. And really it comes down to expectations. Success is meeting or exceeding expectations. That's the definition I like to use. I use it a lot in my job and everything else. Meeting or exceeding expectations. The question becomes, where do those expectations come from? And if there's no agreement, if you and your dad or mom and dad haven't agreed on what those expectations are, how do you form an agreement? How do you form a contract? How can you say you either met the terms or did not meet the terms if there was never any agreement at all? Did an episode on forgiving our fathers. We need to be able to forgive them, not for them, but for us. Walking around holding resentment, holding bitterness towards our fathers hurts us more than it does them. In many cases, they may feel something that they've hidden deep inside and found a way to compartmentalize that, because as men, we're good at compartmentalizing things and just putting them away and not dealing with them at all. Whereas you as the child, it nags you, it irritates you. Even as an adult, it affects all of your relationships. It affects your relationships with your significant other in your life. It affects the relationships with your own children. It affects your mood when Father's Day rolls around and everybody's celebrating, or many people are celebrating a dad or a good dad, and you find yourself muted or angry because you don't have anything to celebrate. So we need to find a way to forgive those dads. And let's talk about those expectations. Where did they come from? Where did the expectations that you have for your dad come from? You know, Chris Rock does that joke where he talks about women, children, and pets. I'm not sure if it's pets or dogs and pets are loved unconditionally. But as a man, you have to provide. You got to put food on the table. You better bring some money to the table, clothes, food, shelter. Listen, we're providers, we're protectors, we're procreators, we're promise keepers. As men, as fathers, that's what we are. Fair or unfair, yes, we do need to perform to some extent. There are lots of reasons why we may not be able to or may not be able to perform up to expectations. But my point is here, where did those expectations come from? Is there a woman who is disappointed, a mother who is disappointed, who has now created these expectations? Let's say the dad is not there. Now, this mother has to carry the burden by herself. She's working, paying bills, taking care of the kids, no time for a personal life or anything else for herself. And it comes out as anger and bitterness towards those kids. You're no good, just like your father is no good. You're setting expectations that may or may not be able to be met. As difficult as it may be, as a mother, you shouldn't be dogging that man in front of the kids. And I know that's a tall order to do. And listen, I spent a lot of time getting on men. Don't let them get away with anything. As a man, you make a child, you should be taking care of that child, regardless of your relationship with that mother. But also as a mother, you got to check yourself as well. There got to be some balance there. And not all mothers are good mothers. I'll say that again. Not all mothers are good mothers. We'd like to think so. We don't hear much about bad mothers. At least it's not as common to talk about it. It's not blasted on social media. There seems to be peer pressure in saying good things about a mother. You know, Kirk Franklin, we've talked about his story before, how he never knew who his father was. The man that he was told was his father, he later on found out was not his father. A man came forward and said, "Hey, I am your father." They did a DNA test, came back 99% sure. And this is, if you go to YouTube and you look up Kirk Franklin on Father's Day, all of this is there. Came back 99% sure that this man is the father. He went to his mother. His mother said, "No, that is not your father. There must be a mistake." They did another DNA test. Results came back exactly the same. She still denies it. To this day, over a year later, she is still denying it. She's not perfect. I'm not going to call her a bad mother, but she's not perfect. And there are other instances. If you go back and listen to the interview that I did with DeMarco James, he talks about that as well. When he found out, a man came up to him and said, "I'm your real father." And when he confronted his mother wasn't truthful at first, but then she came and admitted the truth. So there are instances like that. There are women who are so absorbed into their work. They may have drug habits. They may have other interests. Maybe they're out chasing men. They're leaving their kids with other people and so forth. Not every mother is a good mother, but they don't seem to get the same rap that fathers get. So we want to make sure that we show some balance, that we're fair to moms, we're fair to dads, and that we've set those expectations for them appropriately. And as a child growing up, someone sets those expectations for you. And what I'm saying to the people around you, mother, maybe grandmother, aunties, uncles, brothers, set realistic expectations. We've talked about on many occasions, most of the time when a man and a woman lay down to have relationships, they're not planning on having a child. Somehow, some way, that woman matures, grows, and develops to become that mother, matures to become that mother many times on day one. The father many times, and it could take up to 2 years or more before he comes around and says, "Hey, I got a child. I need to change." Now, sometimes it happens right away. Again, it goes into nurture. Women are nurtured too, as they play with dolls, baby dolls. They feed them, they change them, they do their hair, they change their clothes and everything else. Boys playing sports, playing with trucks, playing video games, whatever it may be, have not been nurtured in that way. So it doesn't quite click. A woman also has her body physically changes during that 9-month period and then goes through the process of delivering that child. All of those things work to, if you will, switching on that button from her being a woman to her being a mother. And you never stop being a woman, but that mother part kicks in because of all those changes, whereas a man doesn't do that. I just saw Serena Williams. She was talking about having to quit tennis because she wanted to have children, and that's a choice that a male tennis player at her same age would not have had to make. Fair or unfair, those are the cards that we as human beings are dealt. A mother typically becomes a mother very quickly. Even after, sometimes it happens after delivery, there's some resistance there, there's some fear there and everything, but they usually step into that role. Whereas a man, depending on his age, depending on his maturity, depending on his background and nurture, he's liable to run and not do the things that he should be doing, taking on the responsibility that he should as a father. And then you have situations and circumstances where mom, grandma, family members make it even more difficult for him to be that dad to that child, make it uncomfortable for him to come to that home where his child is and be the dad. I've seen this happen over and over again. Young man who I'm very close to, he's working. You know, he and the baby mama not married. They are co-parenting, doing a very good job now. But initially, she was living with her mother, and he worked till late at night. It was, let's just say, it wasn't a decent hour for him to be showing up at her mother's house to see his child. And then he had to go back to work early in the morning, or he was sleeping and then had to go back to work. Again, it just didn't make it convenient or accessible or respectable for him to go see his child. They ended up changing their living situation to make it easier. He's doing much better. It's not always an easy ride becoming that father. You have to show that man some grace and give him the opportunity to come in there without the eye rolling and the teeth sucking and when you going to do this, when you going to do that, putting those maybe unfair or undue pressures on him. He could step up at some point and be a great dad. But if you're constantly beating him over the head, he going to run. You know, it's fight or flight. And he's not going to fight the whole family. Sometimes men do. He going to go. It's easier for him to walk away and pretend that it doesn't exist, that situation does not exist, than it is to fight to see his child. Now, thank God there are some men who are courageous and will do it, and there are others who will not. So not all mothers in situations are great. And if you go back through the episodes of the podcast, we talk about you should be a man having responsibilities, a job, a roof over your head, being able to provide, to protect, to be that procreator. And procreator is not just making a baby, but understanding who you are and being able to duplicate yourself in that child, having integrity, being honest, being emotionally stable, being able to talk about the things that are uncomfortable for you so that you can be in a healthy relationship. Whether you're married to that woman, the mother of your child or not, it takes a level of emotional intelligence, emotional maturity, communication that you have to have in order to be able to raise a child. And many times, listen, we out here wilding, not thinking about the consequences of our actions. And then when we do produce a child, we disappear. We got to be better than that. We have to be better than that. Going back to the mothers, not all mothers are good mothers. And I don't want to sound like I'm bashing mothers here, but I want to have a little bit of equity here between mom and dad. There are some men who raise their children. I know several of them who have raised their children on their own. I did it for a period of time, not the entire life of my kids, because I'm a widower. My wife died when my youngest two were 9 and 11, and they're 24 and 22 now. Okay, so there was a time when I was raising them on my own. My older two, they were 21 and 23 when she passed. So they had known her all of her life, but there was some guidance, some direction that you give as a father, even when your children are young adults, into their 30s. I'm very proud of my kids and everything else. But there are some fathers who have taken their children from a very young age as infants, and the mother is still alive. And she's not there. She's not involved in their lives. Why don't we do this? On Father's Day, let's not bash the dads, the bad dads. There are a lot of good dads. I don't think get enough credit for being a good dad. It's almost like you're taken for granted if you are a good dad and you're doing the right things. Celebrate those dads who are doing the right things. I mean, really, give them a big up, give them a shout out, let them know you see their efforts, you see what they're doing. And those dads who are trying, maybe they're not hitting on all cylinders. Maybe they, a couple of bricks short of a load, couple of cards short of a deck. Encourage them. When you see their effort and they're doing a good job, encourage them. And listen, we do this with mothers all the time. Baby, I see you. You got 3 kids. You struggling. You getting them here. You getting them there. You doing this. You doing that. And we encourage those mothers. We need to encourage those dads as well. There's been a whole big shift in the way fathers interact with their kids nowadays. They're changing tables in the men's room. Changing tables in the men's room. I know, I just turned 60 years old. And growing up, I don't remember seeing, not that I was looking for them, but even as a teenager in my early 20s and 30s, I don't remember seeing changing tables in the men's bathrooms. And now there are. Men are walking around with diaper bags. They're changing diapers. My son is an awesome dad. I mean, I watch him. He's got the kids' schedules down, feeding them down. He is, here, it's time for them to eat, feed them this, feed them that. He's putting them to bed every night. He's praying with them and everything else. So we have some dads who are super, super involved. So we have evolved. We're doing better. Encourage those men that are doing that great job. And let's think about what we're saying in front of those kids. Because even when you think they're not listening, if they're in earshot, they're hearing everything that you're saying. And they're forming their own opinions, and they're forming expectations about the man in their lives. And one day, that man may straighten up and fly right. And what you're doing is you're creating barriers that ultimately will hurt that child. Because it's going to create a barrier for them to let their father in when the father does finally get it right. And listen, we don't always get it right from the very beginning. It takes some time. I know myself, with my oldest child. He was playing soccer on Saturday mornings, 5, 6 years old. I was working on every Saturday morning. I was working family business. We worked 6 days a week. I was one of the principals in the business, always working. They had gone through an entire season, and my late wife had to kick my butt and tell me, hey, you've missed every single game this season. This is the last one. You need to be there. And I got there, and I was home every night, helped bathe them, change them, everything else. Okay. Just didn't feel that was important at that time with the first child. Now, with my last two, I never missed a game. I was at every game. Now, with the first two as well, once I learned that lesson, I made sure I was there. After that season, whatever they were involved in, soccer, basketball, football, baseball, whatever it was, sometimes I was coaching. Other times I still had to work Saturdays. I would take off, go to their games, and then do my work on a Saturday. Because you only get 18 years, let's say, with that child. And then they're out of the house. Let's call it 15. Because once they start driving and start moving on their own, they really don't want you around that much. So 15 summers, 15 winters, 15 springs, 15 falls, you get with that child. I was super involved in my church on Sunday mornings. I was one of the leaders there. And my sons play basketball on Sunday mornings. For me, being involved in the church was very important. There was an avenue to kind of move up in the ranking of the church, the leadership order by being there on Sundays. But I realized that I only had a short opportunity with my children on Sundays. Now they're all grown. They're all out of the house. I can be in church every Sunday that I want to be there without missing anything, without it costing anything. Know that pouring into those children, especially when they're young, and it's hard because you're growing, developing, things are changing, opportunities are coming your way, and you don't want to sacrifice for your children. Sacrifice for your children. I mentioned my late wife passed away, and I had two young daughters at home, and I'm raising them. I actually took jobs that were, I don't want to say below me, but I took jobs that made it possible for me to make it home in time to take care of them, as opposed to making my career my priority. Now, as a dad, that's kind of different, but women do it every day, all the time. They make their children their priority, even when they are single moms. And I don't really like that, single moms. Even when they're parenting by themselves, have primary custody of their children, they are making their children a priority. And many times as dads, we don't do that. And we need to do more of that. So when it comes down to this whole debate, Mother's Day versus Father's Day, we shouldn't bash. Should not bash fathers on Father's Day. Celebrate mothers on Mother's Day. Celebrate fathers equally on Father's Day. Be careful of your expectations for those men. And really question yourself, examine yourself and say, hey, are my expectations realistic for my dad? This is the Manhood Podcast. You can watch us on YouTube at the Manhood Podcast YouTube channel. Anywhere you get your podcast from, Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, iHeart, you can listen to us there. I appreciate you listening to us. please share us with somebody else. The podcast is not just for men. There's a lot of healing here for women. And I've had some women come talk to me and say, hey, what you've talked about with dads has helped me understand my own dad, or has helped me understand my baby daddy. I don't like that old baby daddy, baby mama type of stuff, but my baby daddy helped me understand who he is and how he ticks, and maybe gives you a fresh approach into how you deal with him. Thank you for listening, and enjoy.